Okay, so what I wanted to do was to try to explain how I go about my input lag testing. And so what I've done is I've got a video up here which basically shows what I go through to get some results out. And so this video specifically is using BlazBlue Chronophantasma Extend. The reason I use this game, it's across multiple different formats, so it should allow for kind of comparisons. So it's on PlayStation 3, it's on PlayStation 4, it's on Vita, it's on PC, and it's also on Xbox One. Further looking at some of the older versions, so I think I've got Chrono Shift Extend, and that responds at about the same time. So we should also be able to check uh, the Xbox 360. The only other game that's like this would be Dead or Alive 5 Last Round. And again, I've got that over a few different formats. It's a bit slower to respond, and animation tends to be a bit more subtle. So that's why I tend to use BlazBlue a bit more. So what I've got is, actually, I'll just restart again just to check that we're doing the right one. Yeah, so the way that I do it, I've loaded it up into Sony Vegas, which is my editing software that I use. And you can see the time display there. So that's the number of frames that have elapsed. And then the only other thing to talk about, I'll just show you with the mouse here. I've got this overlay, which basically has 16, 15, 14, 13, 11, 10, 9, 8, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what happens is you have this green bar appears on the screen. And that is, if you've seen my setup video, that's the time where the Arduino has sent out a signal to the button or the direction or whatever you're testing, and it's also sent out a signal to a little optical coupler, which refuses to allow the signal to go through. And so you get this bizarre green discoloration. So if you go back 3 frames, you'll see it's all nicely colored in. And then suddenly for this one, here at the top, you've got this green discoloration. And then even underneath that, you've got this kind of bizarre washed out kind of frame. And then a frame later, oh, sorry, I need to zoom in. A frame later, you get this kind of red thing. From what I can kind of put together, that's like a rebound effect where the color comes back. And you can see down then by the bottom of the frame, all of the colors are back to normal. Okay. The way that I've set it up to test is a little bit complicated, but I think it's quite powerful in what it allows us to do. So what I do is for a single millisecond, and so these markers are milliseconds. Obviously, the top of the frame is where it's rendered less, and so that's further. That's if an input occurs here and the game responds, that suggests that the game is a bit slower responding. Whereas if an input occurs here and the game responds, that suggests the game's a bit quicker to respond because it does render from the top to the bottom. And so then at the time when that input occurred, if it's later or lower down, quicker response. Okay. I send out two simultaneous signals. So I send out one that lasts for a millisecond and I send one that lasts for a whole frame. The one that lasts for the entire frame is down. The one that lasts for the millisecond is back. There's a bit of a logic to this. Okay. So the first thing we'll do, we'll just kind of look through. So what will have happened is that there's been a down signal sent out. You won't be able to catch it on the command history just because it's full of them. But what happens is you count. So it's up at the 16 millisecond mark there. We go 1, 2, 3. So on the third frame after the command was input, we can see a clear response in terms of Ragnar's animation. So he starts ducking. This is consistent across different formats, and the timing seems about right between different games. This is the way that I'm kind of looking to analyze how quickly different things respond. Just to let you know, I'm using the DualShock 4 wired controller for this, connected via USB connection with the USB mode engaged, because I think this is the one that most people are most interested in. There's quite a few different there's a lot of intricacies and variations and things that kind of summate to how much a joystick or a PCB or a gamepad will lag. This one's fairly simple. I can make a few example videos later of more complicated ones. So just going back, this responds on the third frame. Okay, so what I tend to do is to just skip in 3-frame increments. So you can see on the time display here, we've gone from 72 to 75 and we've had a response. It just means that you can cut out a lot of the kind of waiting time in between. Now you can see here, compared to the previous time, we've actually, the green bars advanced down the screen a little bit. So within the frame, or within when it's testing the next time, it's testing just a touch later. Okay, and this is important. So we'll see here what happens. So this time we get a down back. Okay, so what this means is, or what this lets us do, as we said, we're outputting a down command for the entire one frame, so 16.66 milliseconds. So it'll be all the way here and then wrapping over to the top. And then this is kind of, as we said, the rebound, or the time when the video signal starts again, and it takes a little bit of time to, I don't know, recalibrate or to get back to normal. The back signal is only for this 1 millisecond, okay? And so that means that if you don't get, the down signal will almost always overlap where the controller is polling for the command, but you've got no idea where within that single frame, which one of those milliseconds was the time where it was actually polling. So by sending out simultaneous commands, by sending out one that lasts for only a millisecond, the only time the game will respond, or the only time the controller will respond and send the signal for back through to the game, is when you've hit it in that polling window. Okay, so as we can see here, 1, 2, 3, this time we get a down back. Okay, so that means that that command at 16 milliseconds hit the polling window for back, and of course the down one, because it kind of smothers it or it just goes over an entire frame, still works. So that'll work as well. So you get down back. Okay, so as I said, I tend to do these in 3-frame increments just to make the kind of timing quicker. I send out those 1 frame and 1 millisecond commands every 24 frames, and that's purely so that the animation has returned back to normal. And that's not just for BlazBlue, but that's over a couple of other different games. You can intentionally choose commands, like in Street Fighter, you could choose a command or an action that takes less than 24 frames, just so you're back to your neutral stance to make counting easier. So if we go again here, so we can see we only got the down this time. Okay, so to note, the first time we got the down back command to come out was here, and it was in the 16 millisecond range. So to convert that into how long the game took to respond, we count 16 milliseconds plus 1 whole frame plus another whole frame plus, well, nothing. Because presumably, if the command hasn't already been arrived by the time this frame starts animating, then it's not going to have any effect. So the way that I count it, and I'm happy for kind of discussion about this, is that where this command occurs, all the remaining milliseconds on the frame, all of these milliseconds, so 16.66 plus 16 plus another 16.66 is our total. Okay. So what you can do then is count through and see what the kind of spread of commands is, and how kind of accurately or how often the gamepad or the PCB or whatnot will respond. Okay, so we're kind of going through here, and this is what I do. So all I'm looking for is when a down back comes out, because that means that that 1 millisecond signal will have overlapped the polling window. Okay, so again, this is the dual, and there's one. All right, so this time it's hit in the 15 millisecond. The way I've constructed these bars is by looking to see, and so remembering that I'm using an HDMI to analog component converter, I've looked up, there's 750 lines, but only 720 of those are displayed on the screen. I've divided that by the 16.66 milliseconds to work out how many pixels or how many lines on the screen each millisecond will require, and so then I've divided it equally. I've got a pale little line here just so we can sort out between 16 and 16.66 milliseconds, but that's getting quite detailed. The thing that pleases me, so I've tested internally to check that there's not too much time between when the 1 millisecond and the 16.66 millisecond signal comes out, and that normally comes in at about 16 to 20 microseconds. The other thing is, I mean, if you want to get really detailed, and I don't, I keep it to millisecond level, but every line on the screen is 24, I think, I can't quite remember the number, but it's about 24 microseconds. Okay, so if you could get rid of all of the other kind of sources of error in testing, you could actually do this incredibly accurately. I've done that before, but I kind of feel I'm going to keep it to the millisecond level because that's beyond what other people have been able to do, and it's, you know, I think it's diminishing returns to try to go much deeper than that. So again, this is in the 15 millisecond range. So 15 milliseconds plus a whole frame plus another whole frame responds here. Okay. So what we can do, as I said, I kind of go through this. I look for all of the times that you get a down back response, because that's the one where you've just hit the polling window. The down response is a bit, you know, it's a crude measure. So just now, if you look, we've skipped past the time where all of the down responses happen. So this is at 10 milliseconds. So what we can do instead now is count back and wait to see where did that last one happen. So this is at the 12. Okay, and if we go ahead, that's a down back, and so it's responded. Interesting that a down comes after the down back, and there's an explanation to that, but I won't go into it for this video. But again, so we've got the game responding to a millisecond long back command that's input with 12 milliseconds left in the kind of frame. And again, same old 1, 2, 3. Okay. So this is the way that I've kind of been able to test inputs for different devices to a higher degree of accuracy than I believe has been done previously. And I'm fairly happy with the kind of logic and then the system for testing this. And so, as I said, we can skip through this. So what I generally do is I run 5 different trials. I disconnect the HDMI converter just to make sure that's not introducing any lag. At best, I've seen that it probably varies by about 250 microseconds. The other thing that I've done is I've checked it without a converter. So with the PlayStation 3, you can output a native component signal. And again, I think there's probably about, at most, 500 microseconds of difference between the HDMI signal and the component signal. So even with those summated, it should be less than a millisecond of error introduced using the system. So just here, if you look, the green line suddenly disappeared with our 3-frame skipping. And what's happened is that the kind of green line has gone all the way to the bottom, and now it's returned to the top. So all you do there is you skip one forward. Okay, so again, I tend to take a pessimistic approach. If the line is above kind of the 16 millisecond mark, I'll count that as 16 milliseconds. Like I said, I'm not going to split this from, at the moment, my method is to not split it down into sub-millisecond numbers. So if we look here, this is, again, the 16 millisecond band. So we've already kind of worked out the range of our values on the last one. And so that has a down back response. The last thing which I'll show you quickly with this video, so we'll just skip through again and we'll get a rough idea when that last down back came out. So that was in the 13 millisecond band. There's one that's happening in the 12 millisecond band, which is about the same as last time. And so we've run out of commands here, haven't we? What I'll just do quickly is I'll go back to, I can do it here actually. So this is, say, a green band that's happening in the 9 millisecond range, which was later than any of the single millisecond responses responded, or millisecond signals were responded to. So I'll just zoom in so we skip one frame at a time. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3. No response, 4. Okay, so now even with that down signal, he's responding a whole frame later. And so that's kind of confirms, or this is an alternative way to show it, that our input window is happening somewhere between kind of the 12 and the 16 millisecond mark on these things on the side of the screen. And then if you start putting your signal in on the 10th millisecond, or with 9 milliseconds remaining in the frame, it's too late. It skips, or it's missed that polling window, and therefore it occurs a whole frame later. Okay, and we can skipping by one frame at a time, but we can continue to show that. So here, 9 milliseconds, 1, 2, 3. This is where it would have responded if our command was occurring up here in like a 16 millisecond band. But because we've hit it down here, it's too late, and so it responds a frame later. So just to show then how we kind of compare different sticks or pads or whatnot, we can put in a different controller. And so I'll just see if I can pull up the one that, again, people are, again, most interested in. Sorry, I've got a whole, here we go. So this is the PS4 DualShock 4 wireless, and this is for, again, we run 5 runs. Okay, so we repeat a green band at the top all the way to the bottom 5 times over. So what I do, I skip ahead until I get that green bar. So that's there at the top of the screen, so we're ready to start. And we're going by 3 frames each time. Now, I'm going to keep going until we start seeing down backs here. So that, as we were saying, 1 millisecond long input, and it means that that 1 millisecond long input has coincided with where the input window or the polling window is occurring. So you can already see, remembering that the wired DualShock 4 in USB mode with the USB cable connected was up in the 16 to the kind of 12 range. I've got raw data that I've already done for this, so I can show you exactly the range in a different post. We're all the way down here, 6 milliseconds, so 6 milliseconds left in this frame, and we're still not getting any signal, and he's still responding in 3 frames. So just to zoom in, 1674, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that already tells us that the DualShock 4, which is wireless, is responding quicker. Oops, we haven't zoomed in enough there. Okay, so when we finally get it, it's actually really, really late. Okay, so this is in the 4 milliseconds left in this frame, still responding after 3 frames. Just to zoom in to prove it, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is how I do my testing. This is how we take an Arduino sends out a signal to an optical coupler, which is connected to a controller. So it's electronically isolated. It sends out a signal to the buttons, and it sends out 2 signals simultaneously. It sends out one, which is to the down signal, and that lasts for a frame. It sends out one to the back signal, and that lasts for a millisecond. So you almost always, although some controllers don't do it every single, will not respond to a 1 frame long input every single time. And I think this is, this is one of the strengths of this system. It does, definitely input lag is kind of the simplest, and I accept that it's a very complicated system. It's the simplest thing that we're able to test. But there's a whole lot more that we can test, such as drop commands or overlapping commands, or commands that actually happen at quite different times within that polling window that are all still accepted by the game. So it's quite complicated to test those things, but they are an issue. All right, 1, 2, 3. Down back, so that means that the back signal that was input here, along with the down signal, have both been received. Okay, so we'll just go here. So that only resulted in a down. And that's because, to my mind, and someone else can explain it if they want to, that the kind of polling window varies a little bit over a range here. And so you won't always, your 1 millisecond, it's not, when I first started testing, I was hoping that there would be just a band, and you could find that band, and that would be your answer. I think because of the way controllers poll, say if it only polls every 3 milliseconds, and occasionally it would be here, then the next one it might be here, and it's like it's polling here, but then they'd be overridden by an empty command here. So in terms of a successful command for a single millisecond input, it might kind of vary between these values. And so that to me is the reason why you'd occasionally get a back, and or not occasionally, but often get a back and then you'd get a down back and then a back command coming out in series. All right. And so if we just kind of follow this through, again, we can see how late the command will still be accepted in the frame. So this is getting really late. Okay. This is all the way down here with 2 milliseconds left in the frame. And you can see there, I think we caught it. Might be a bit of a pain to find. Oh no, so that's becoming responding on the 4th frame. Again, responding on the 4th frame. All right, so that suggests that we've gone on the other side of the polling window. Just to finish, and I'm happy if you guys are tuning out by now, because I know it's been a fairly complicated and intricate video. Yeah, but I just wanted to get it all out so that no one can say I haven't explained my methods. So this is the Ultimate Fighting Board. From memory, it was the 1.8 revision, although I'm not actually convinced that there's much of a change to response. I get the feeling Brooke probably got close to maxing out how quickly a joystick can respond. I'm not convinced we're suddenly going to see a hugely more responsive Brook board. I think they're probably pretty close, and I think they know it as well. All right, so we're just scrolling through here. And so, I mean, everybody kind of expects, or the feeling of most people is that the Brook is the least laggy board available. You can see here we're getting down backs much, very late in the frame. And I'm just going to go to the final one and then count back to see how late we can go. Like, look at that. That's way down in the 1 millisecond band, and we're still getting a response. And just to count it out for you, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you're getting a down back response with your signal all the way down here. All right, and so that then is just a visual way of demonstrating how late the Brook can respond, and we can count it all through. It actually becomes quite a pain because the way the analog signal displays a 720 display is it's missing some pixels down the bottom and it's missing some pixels up the top. And what that is, there's non-displayed pixels or lines, and so then counting can become a little bit more challenging. But I'm happy enough, kind of having sorted that out, that the system is right. So you can see here, it's so late, it almost isn't visible, probably isn't visible on the screen. You can count over the next frame and check that it's not actually on the next frame and so forth. But I've done that, and I'm happy enough that it's just responding incredibly late in this frame. Okay, and so that's pretty much what I do. And so I've already released a whole bunch of my results. The main limitation I feel at the moment is time, and also then access to different sticks. Okay, so any questions, just feel free to hit me up at Twitter or send a response to my YouTube channel, and I'll answer what I can.